Now your show is on RT. Now there's a Russia hysteria that has taken over the country. And my theory is it's just that the establishment didn't want to examine the system that brought us Donald Trump. So it was easier to blame another country. When everybody knows the people manipulating our elections are right here in the United States, we have a completely captured government, captured by corporations, meaning Wall Street, the military-industrial complex, big pharma, healthcare, and fossil fuel companies. Those are the people manipulating our elections. Now, what do you make of all this RussiaGate?
Jimmy, take a look back. Look what's gotten lost in the shuffle of all this. The most important thing of this whole thing got lost in the shuffle here, and you don't hear a word about it. And that was this. Those documents that leaked out of the supposedly were hijacked out of the Democratic Convention or the Democratic Party.
Yes.
They showed that the thing was fixed, that Bernie Sanders didn't have a chance, that Hillary was going to get it no matter what, and the whole thing was a fraud and a fix. And that's been lost. Nobody talks about I came out and said if the Russians expose that, we should thank them.
I couldn't agree with you more.
Because that's the real news story that's been lost in all this, was the fact that the Democratic election process was completely fixed. Hillary and her money was behind the whole Democratic Party, and she had them in the bag. It did not matter what Bernie did. It didn't matter how many votes Bernie got. Hillary was getting the nomination. And they want us to believe today, they're trying to sell us, that if Russia hadn't interfered, Hillary'd be the president now.
I'm with you 100%. I try to remind people that this is all a distraction from the biggest election fraud in the history of our country, which was the Democratic primary in 2016. I mean, they have fraud built into their process, Jesse. You know, super delegates. That sounds like...
Oh, absolutely. Well, look at my home state, Jimmy, my home state of Minnesota.
Yes.
Voters, it went overwhelmingly for Bernie Sanders, but it ended up a wash. You know why? The two super delegates were Franken and Klobuchar. They both voted for Hillary, and that washed away the people's choice, which was Bernie Sanders.
Which when Al Franken, when he went away, I did not shed a tear for that very reason. He is willing to go against the will of his people very happily to prop up a warmongering oligarch over someone who was favored by the people. So that tells you all you need to know about Al Franken. Did you know Al Franken personally? You're both from Minnesota.
Yeah, well, I knew him, and my biggest criticism with Al, I like Al because Al's always showed me a great deal of respect, which I appreciate that as an independent. But my problem with Al Franken's whole candidacy was he hadn't lived in Minnesota for probably 15 or 20 years.
Right.
And then he moves back here, gets an apartment back here, and runs for Senate.
Right.
Well, excuse me, shouldn't you be, I've lived in Minnesota my entire life, basically, other than the few forays out in the pro wrestling world in the territory days where you had to go live in New York and you had to go live in a couple other places. But I've always maintained a Minnesota driver's license, and my home residence has always been Minnesota. Al Franken hadn't lived in Minnesota for 20 to 25 years, and then all of a sudden he comes back and becomes the senator.
I had problems with his bend towards neoliberalism and his support of the system. I was hoping he would be like a real comedian, an outsider who was going to shake up the system, and it turned out that was not his plan. His plan was to act.
Well, Jimmy, you got to learn something. Anyone that joins the two parties is not going to shake up the system.
So let me ask you, just
like Donald Trump. Donald Trump is not an independent. He's a Republican. He joined the Republican Party. That's why I would never, ever consider endorsing him in any way, shape, or form. Because once you join the party, you're part of that gang. You're part of that machinery. I'll plug another one of my books shamelessly. I wrote the book Democrats and Republicans, No More Gangs in Government. And I actually apologize at the start of the book to the Crips and the Bloods for using their name in that manner.
So, that's funny. So what do you think about, saying pretty much the same thing you've been saying, Jesse, is that how much longer is it going to take for people to realize that the Democratic Party not only does not represent progressives, but they actively work against them. And someone like Bernie Sanders, who keeps what I call sheepdogging progressives into a party he's not even a member of. Why do you think that's happening?
Well, because Bernie really is a Democrat. He masks himself as an independent so that he can have an I by his name. But Bernie's he's a Democrat. He ran in the Democratic primary, and I knew from the get-go that Bernie's whole campaign was going to end up a joke and a fraud in a way, because early on he came to Minneapolis and I went down to meet with him, and I was actually considering endorsing him. Well, first of all, he wouldn't give me the time of day. He met with me for 30 seconds to a minute in the hallway, but I was able to ask him a question early on. I said, Bernie, Senator, if you lose the Democratic primary, will you support another independent or will you run yourself as an independent? He looked me right in the eye, and this was way before, and he said, oh, no, absolutely not. I will endorse the Democratic nominee.
Yeah,
And so I walked out of the building that day knowing, I said, I'm not endorsing Bernie Sanders because Bernie's going to get wasted out of this thing, and then he's going to tell all his people to vote for Hillary. And that's what I believe won the election for Trump. I think that many of Bernie's people sat it out.
Well, the statistics show. I certainly didn't vote for the Democrat. I was a Bernie supporter who ended up supporting the Green Party. I voted for Jill Stein because
so did I.
I could not support warmongers anymore. That's just how I am. And so I voted my conscience. People forget that Hillary Clinton, right before the election, she tweeted out, vote your conscience. Now, of course, she didn't mean that. That was another lie. What she meant was, if you're a Republican, don't vote for Trump. That's what she meant by that, right?
See, to me, Hillary, I could never support her because she admitted the most important vote she ever took as a U.S. Senator, she got wrong.
The Iraq War?
The Iraq War. Well, then why would I want her as president when the most important vote, by her own admission, that she did as a senator was wrong?
Excuse
me, that's the most important vote you ever did, and you got it wrong? And now you think I should elect you president?
Vote for Hillary Clinton. What do you say to those people?
Well, it's simple. You vote for the person you most want to be president. Look how, and the Democrats are great at that. They're great at they never accept blame that Hillary ran a lousy campaign. She took for granted, thought she'd win for sure, and she got knocked on her ass. And but they blame something else. So they blame the Russians. Well, back in 2000, who did they blame for when the same scenario took place? Al Gore beat George W. Bush in the popular vote, but George W. Bush won the Electoral College. Who did they blame? My friend Ralph Nader. Yes. Then it was Ralph's fault, because all the people that voted for Ralph should have voted for Al Gore. See, that's the way Democrats think. And the point of all of this is when you go to vote, you haven't wasted your vote if you vote your conscience and you vote for the person you most want to be president.
So, yeah, I agree with you. I've been taking heat from everyone, and literally people blame me, and I'm like, couldn't you find someone with less money and power than me to blame this election on? And the proof that they don't even believe that garbage themselves, when people say that it was your fault or my fault or Susan Sarandon or Jill Stein's fault, if they really thought that we had that kind of power, they would try to reach out to us and they would try to woo us, which is what politicians are supposed to do. Politicians, they're incumbent upon them to get people to vote for you. And if people don't vote for you, it's your fault. You don't blame the voters, which is exactly what the Democrats and their minions are doing. That would be like if the Chicago Bears lost a football game and they blame the fans.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly, but that's the way it works. The Dems are good at that. They never accept their own shortfalls. They never accept the fact that they got beat again, because they really don't stand for that. And truthfully, these two parties, they stand together on the things that are most important to them and to the world. You notice both parties. Here's the thing that angers me, Jimmy. You just had Donald Trump shoot rockets in Syria again.
Yeah.
Now, it happened a year ago when I left. I thought I was reliving my deja vu, my life over again. I come back and I hear the same thing I heard a year ago. Now, here's my question. Syria is not a terrorist group. Syria is a legitimate country with a legitimate government. Now, it just so happens we don't seem to like them, but what gives us the right to pump weapons of war, rockets, into Syria without a declaration of war?
Nothing gives us that right. In fact, it's an illegal war act is what we're doing. And
exactly. We are breaking the law. Donald Trump should be arrested for doing that, for violating the very thing he took an oath. When you're in the military, you take an oath to protect the Constitution and Bill of Rights from all enemies, foreign and domestic. Well, then I took an oath to defend myself against Donald Trump, because Donald Trump is violating the Constitution by going to war without Congress's permission. And I don't give a crap about these lawyers' opinions that they bring in who try to whitewash it around and look for openings in it. It's very clear. You don't go to war unless Congress votes for it. Our founding fathers were very clear on that. I'll give you another little tidbit people forget about, 9/11. Dick Cheney had no right to be in charge in that lower bunker in 9/11. The Constitution, they violated it there. The Constitution's very clear. It says unless the president is dead or incapacitated. The president was on Air Force One, which is fully equipped to run the country. Why was Cheney calling the shots, which was completely protocol illegal? The vice president has never, ever been given that power before.
Well, Jesse, Yeah, I agree with you. That was crap. There's so many unanswered questions, and we're never going to get answers to any of those questions because you can't question anything, even the investigation by the 9/11 Commission.
Jimmy, you got to keep asking them, though, or they win.
Yeah, they just discredit you. They go, "Oh, you're some kind of conspiracy nut," right? Even though the real conspiracy was the Iraq War,
here's
right?
How you counter that, Jimmy. Here's how you counter that. I'm smiling at them and say, yes, I do have a higher IQ. Because England did a huge study and found out conspiracy theorists are generally more intelligent.
Well, I agree. I agree with you. I think that the big conspiracy that no one talks about are these wars, right? So the first Gulf War was a conspiracy that was also based on a pack of lies. The second Gulf War, also Iraq War, also a conspiracy based on a pack of lies. Libya, Syria, these are all conspiracies by our government, and yet when you try to call them out and investigate them, they smear you with that term. I just got CNN just referred to me as a conspiracy theorist who peddles conspiracies such as the Syrian gas attacks were hoaxes. Well, anybody who does any investigation into those knows that those were at best false flags.
Here's the deal on the Middle East, and it's really simplified. All the countries we're attacking, be it Iran, maybe Syria, who we've already attacked, Libya we destroyed, and Iraq we destroyed. Here's why. Every one of those countries was going to go off the dollar.
Yes.
What you've got, we are going to war at the behest of the banking community, the bankers, the big money men. And they don't want these countries going off the dollar. And do you think that's just coincidence that every single country that we've waged war on in the last 20 years has been because they've threatened to get rid of the dollar?
And so this people don't realize how much the petrodollar actually plays into this, right? Now, we have a deal since we went off the gold standard under Nixon that Saudi Arabia, whenever they sold oil around the world, whoever was buying it from them, they would have to first convert their currency into U.S. dollars and then buy the oil. And then Saudi Arabia would take some of those dollars and buy our bonds back here in the United States. And that's how they're propping up our economy. So if we don't go to war over the petrodollar, our economy will collapse. That's the theory, right?
Yeah, and that's why if you look at every country we're attacking are the countries that are threatening to leave the dollar.
So Gaddafi was threatening to get an African currency, right? He was going to start. Yep. He was going to start monetizing the oil on the dinar, correct?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not an expert. I just know. Yeah, Gaddafi was going to go to Africa. Who was going to Europe? They were going to do the euro. One of them, but they're all going to get away from the dollar. And you notice that the minute they start threatening to do that, the United States finds an excuse to attack them militarily and destroy their country, and in hopes of putting in a pro-American dollar government.
Our next live Jimmy Dore show is July 1st in Portland, Oregon. There's a link for tickets for all of our live shows right there. And if you can remember, please take a moment to make sure you're subscribed to the show. It only takes a second. You probably think you're subscribed, but you probably aren't. Just make sure you're subscribed. Click that bell so they send you a notice when we drop a video. Otherwise, they won't tell you. And if you become a premium member or a Patreon, we give you hours of bonus material every week. And we do a live chat every Saturday at 2 p.m. Pacific time where you can ask us questions and we'll answer them. Plus, we're on Steam It. We're steaming it right now.